This is Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot, and I'm here with Aaron McCOLLUM, and he is a third generation from the Project Talent MKUltra experiments on building super soldiers and other human beings that have capabilities far beyond the normal.
I would class myself as being part of the third generation of what was known as Project Talent, but then my real role was actually being, you could say, bred and trained for a certain project that was known as Project SEAGATE. But of course, there's so much that I've uncovered and discovered, and through family and other means, that really makes this such a rabbit hole. To give myself one label is kind of difficult, but I guess for the people, I mean, went through the training process of Project Talent, which is kind of like the recruiting slash talent, you could say, agency that the government uses for finding people that they want to use for certain projects.
Okay, Aaron, we have met before, and we went over the Gulf of Aden and what was going on there with the Stargate and so on. At the moment, I'm not sure if there's any new activity that you're aware of that's going on there. I have gotten some information, not a lot, and some verification of what you were talking about, and we also got sort of a nod from Bob Dean recently in my interview, although he was very careful in the way that he acknowledged that information.
He sure was. The information, they've really put a huge lockdown on what's going on. I think they realized that a lot of information was, so to speak, getting leaked from many sources, and the security there has increased immensely. As far as updated information, I don't have a lot, but what I can tell you is that from what I was told by a source of naval intelligence is that there's actually two, you could say, perimeters that have been created. They have a general perimeter that is what the public is being known as kind of the security zone to stop the piracy. Then within that zone, what I was told was about in a 3-mile diameter circumference are other ships that are watching over a certain area of the Gulf. From what I've been told, this is the general area of where this Stargate anomaly is occurring, where it's opening up, closing up, and whatever else is transpiring there, which are theories I talked about in the first interview, whether it's for good or bad or something that's out of their control and it's really just fear. I'm leaning more towards it's something that's out of their control, and that's why it's such a lockdown, and here's why. There's a website that was shown to me that, I don't remember the name of the website, but it basically shows all commercial vessel traffic that happens in the world. And if you get on that website and you can zoom in on the area of the Gulf of Aden, there's no traffic is shown. They've completely blocked it out. This is a website anybody can access. In fact, remind me and I'll send you that so you can look at that. So it's very
Sounds
interesting.
Fascinating, yeah.
There has been a few more Al-Qaeda, or CIA Al-Qaeda as I like to say, operations happen there. Just recently there was a supposed planned bombing of the UK embassy, but it had failed. So there is some more military movement by the USA and the UK. It seems to me that they're keeping things quiet, but the military movement is still being flooded into Yemen. So I imagine that as things do come in waves of information, that we will be finding out more here soon. I would guess within the next month or so, there's going to be some more information revealed that will definitely show signs of other things going on there.
Okay, and just to say that this is May of 2010 that we're doing this interview, just to put that on the books. Okay, so let's actually go back though, because this interview is really about you and the background to the other interview, and we're doing them sort of in the reverse. This is where we're actually going to tell your story. And so if you would outline what it was like from an early age when you first started having experiences or you know, whatever you want to call it, and go from there.
Okay. Yeah, actually, it's good. In a way, let me just say this, it's really good that we're doing this now, because since our last interview, even the last time we spoke, I have been working on some more metaphysical means that were given to me that have actually opened up a lot of my memories, and then worked through some family members that have revealed a lot. So, I guess we should just start at the beginning. First memory that I have, which for a while was causing me to wake up with nightmares and just thinking I was insane. When I was 3 years old, I was taken to a facility by a family member, one of my grandmothers. I don't remember where the facility is at. I know that I was living in Oregon at the time, and at this facility was a pool. The pool, I remember it being just kind of like, it seemed like almost like a hospital type setting. I remember a lot of white, and somehow I was immobilized. I don't know how they did it, because from what I was told by my mother and father, I could swim before I could walk. So whether it was through using some kind of drug, I don't know. But the point is that I was placed into the pool. I remember a burning sensation, which I now know relates to the feeling of drowning. And then the next thing I remember is laying on a table, coughing up water, and being quite scared. It's still a pretty intense emotional memory. And then hearing these people that were standing around me saying something like, "We've got one," or "He fits," something of that nature. That's when things began. That's when that was my initial evaluation. It's kind of a young age, because most people in my situation, the average age is around 5, 6 years old. But from what I've learned later on, my situation, I don't want to say it's unique, but it's definitely interesting. After that, you know, the rest of that time, 4 years old, I really don't remember much. But then when we get to around the age 5 is when my initial training really began. A lot of the memories are kind of fragmented, but what I'll do is I'll give you the best of what I have, of what I absolutely remember. The place that my family lived at in Oregon when I was that age, we had a military facility that was nearby. I don't remember the name of the facility, but I know that it was a place that my father worked at. He wasn't in the military at the time, but it was a government job. I wasn't taken there by my father, but I was taken there by someone, and then I would be taken to this house with this gentleman that I know was much older, and I know that his name was Mike. I've gotten confirmation of this name and this place through my sister. At this house, I was put through various things. One of the things I remember was being put into, it wasn't necessarily a closet, but it was definitely a small room, almost like it was a constructed compartment that was quite small, soundproof and pitch black. I would be put in there, and I would be in there for hours at a time. It was what I am discovering now, you could say, a sensory deprivation chamber. Now, being 5 years old and being put into one of these, I mean, you can imagine what it must have been like, the memory or the imagination, being in the dark. And I went through this process a lot. One of the other things I remember, and I don't know from point A to point B how I got up to this point, but I remember being asked to walk across it was like a driveway, but the rocks, it was all gravel. And the rocks were very hot. Summers down there were very hot, so it was just, I believe that they were just heating naturally through the sun. And I had to walk across it. And I remember walking across it and not reacting, and then being told to stop halfway and look down, and I'm barefoot, and then walking across. So what transpired prior to that to make me be able to not react to the heat, to the pain, I don't remember, but I definitely know that that was a fact. And I would have burn marks on the bottom of my feet, but not react to them.
When you were put into the chamber, do you remember being afraid?
You know, that's an interesting question. I imagine at the time I was, but I don't really recognize or quite even understand that emotion of fear now. There were a lot of emotions that were taken out of me that, and this is what we can get into a little bit later on, that I've almost had to mimic in a way, to fit into the world I'm in now since December of 2005.
You had this sort of sensory training.
Sensory and definitely pain training, but then there's other things I remember, such as being with a group of kids that were my age and being taken to what is referred to now, from knowing later on, is referred to as the camps. The camps can be anywhere from a weekend to a week to a full summer. What these camps are government-funded training camps where you do a wide variety of things, everything from learning basic things such as rappelling, survival, even how to sharpen knives the proper way, using a knife, and weapons training, and even hand-to-hand combat. From 5 until 8, this was definitely something I remember doing in certain points, such as, you know, having to go out and learn what to eat, how to survive, how to even make, you know, you could say a fort, or, you know, like a makeshift tent. One memory that really stands out: when I was 8 years old, I was taken, and I believe I was with some family. I remember seeing my sister at this place, but it was actually up in Northern California. I don't exactly remember where. But where this place was at, they had a river that ran very, very cold, so I believe it had to have been during the wintertime. Now, who exactly did this, I don't know, but I'm getting to understand why this happened, where I was for 7 days straight, repeatedly, each day for a certain amount of time, was actually dunked, forcibly dunked over and over again into this water. Throughout, and, you know, I'll get into this later on, but throughout the years of childhood of this training that I was going through, a lot of it was very cold water submersion. I don't know if my core body temperature is related to that, but my body core temperature now averages between 96.5 and 97.6. So a degree to 2 degrees colder than what the normal body core temperature is.
But you don't have to wear a jacket as often as other people. Is that right? You're
not at all.
You don't feel cold as much.
Right. Cold weather doesn't really bother me that much. But at the same time, hot weather doesn't really bother. I acclimate, I mean, almost instantly to any kind of weather condition. Then the more violent, I guess, being subjected to violence to really create, for me to be numb to it, that really kicked off between 8 and 9 years old. There was a lot that happened there. There was a place I was taken to with, again, the same group of kids, about maybe a dozen of us, where we were taken into this, there was actually this dugout that was made. I remember the dugout, and they called it the pit, where we actually had to go in, and now these are 8, 9-year-old, and we were told to fight. And it was fight until one of them gave up, or till it was broken up. Pretty bloody.
Were they all boys, or boys and girls?
It was all boys. It wasn't until maybe 8 years later when I started working, when there were some girls that were integrated into this train program that I was a part of.
So what about your parents? What is their recall? Are you in touch with your mother, for example?
I'm in touch with my mother, but we don't really talk. It's not that I don't want to, but because of a lot that's come to surface that I've spoken with some family members, my mother is programmed in such a way that for me to bring this information to her could have really bad effects.
Well, but you're out doing radio shows. You did our interview. I mean,
and she has absolutely no idea of any of it. Okay. It's not that I've kept it from her. It's just it hasn't been relayed to her. Mm-hmm. My father, we've been in contact closely about this subject matter. Some of it he's having a hard time with, but then other things he is accepting. I introduced him to, it turns out that him and Dave Corso, I didn't know this until a little bit after Awake and Aware, that they actually lived in the same town. And in fact, my dad and Dave have history. My dad has been dealing with a lot of blocked memories. So you could say, because of the history that my dad and Dave have, that he was part of the, you could say, as we have deemed it, the pre-generation program, kind of the prototype of what became what Duncan O'Finian was part of, and myself and others.
Mm-hmm. Was your father an officer in the military?
No, he was enlisted, but he was in the Marine Corps, and he did operations in the same locations as Dave did, and they even encountered each other in other parts of the world.
During this time, you're going through these training sequences, and you're being taken there by someone, because you're a child, right? So who's taking you? Well,
mainly until I got to a little bit older, until I got to be 9, it was this guy known as Mike, who knew, or my father knew him, but I really believe from talking with my father now that he was not aware of what was taking place. Because, you know, these camps, these training facilities, they are located all over the country, and there are parents who are not involved or did not have history of being involved, where, you know, the child is taken to maybe a summer camp or what they call outdoor school. They'll see them get on the same bus or get in the same carpool, but they're not taken to that location. They're taken elsewhere.
Okay.
So that does indeed happen.
And are some of your memories about going in, being separated from the other children?
Yes.
Or going, do you have any memories of that?
I do. I have some pretty intense memories of, well, one that I should have mentioned before, so let's backtrack. When I was 5, probably one of the most intense memories I have as a child was waking up during an operation procedure. It was a dark room. I just remember seeing people in obviously the operating type of garb, the masks, and I remember screaming. Now, things are a little fuzzy, but what I do remember is seeing this machine above me with these wires and these tubes going into my left knee, and then all of a sudden hearing commotion and then knocking back out. So I woke up during some kind of procedure they were doing to me.
Okay, but what is the significance of your left knee? Do you have any special sensation or anything there?
I have a lot of interesting things that happen physically with me, and I've had a lot of different surgeries where I would see some of the medical records and then they would wind up disappearing. In fact, to this day, even up to, what was it, a year and a half ago, I went to go get some an MRI done and a CT scan, some x-rays done, because I was having some unusual things occurring with my shoulder, my arm, even with my neck, my head, and my hips. at first I would ask to see the images, and they would tell me, oh, they're getting processed, you can come back later to see them. And then I would go down to the records office, and they would have some of my medical record, but they wouldn't have any of the images. So I've never been allowed to see any of my x-ray or any of the scanned images of my body.
Okay. Okay, so let's go from the age of, I don't know, you said at 9 you were being given this training that seemed kind of to start verging on the military.
Yes.
So at what point, you know, did this escalate, and do you have memories in between that age, say in the age of whenever you enlisted? Did you enlist?
Oh, yes.
You enlisted,
well,
didn't you?
Enlisted would imply that I volunteered,
Uh-huh.
when indeed I was told. I was directed. I will get in that in a second, but let's go with a few other things that I do remember.
Okay.
One that I've talked about before to several other people, I don't remember if I mentioned to you, was in this process, you go through what is evaluations. In this evaluation, what happens is one or whomever passes goes up to the next level, and the rest, well, I don't know what they do with them, but you don't see the kids that you were with. And I'll give you an example. When I was 9, this is when we were living out in the desert, I was again taken with the same group of kids, and we were taken out to this field. It was a pretty large field, mostly flat, had some sage, a few rocks, and out there they had maybe 20 or 30 of these large, I would say there were maybe 3 or 4 foot by 4 foot boards, like plywood, that were scattered all throughout this huge field, acres and acres. Myself and the other kids, by this time there was, I think, 8 of us. We were all put into a line, shoulder to shoulder, but with about 20 feet distance from each other. I'm sure we were given task directions. I don't remember, but what I do remember is that we were then to walk out to this field. I see a board. Now I'd walked by a few boards, but I see one, and now I usually go right-handed, but for some reason I decided to pick up a corner with my left hand. Maybe it was at the angle. But the weird thing is, when I picked it up, there was a rattlesnake underneath this board, and it bit me. It actually bit me right here. I still have a scar or a mark that I'm guessing it may be from it, because I remember being bit right here on my knuckle. I don't remember anything after that. As far as, did I go to the hospital? Did I get antivenom? What happened? What I remember, which I don't know if it was a few weeks or a few months after, was that the other kids I never saw again. I have no idea what happened to them. But I moved up to the next level. I'm still trying to figure out what kind of test that exactly is. Was I supposed to get bitten by the snake? Is that some kind of ritualistic evaluation? I don't know. But a 9-year-old kid, and I was a scrawny kid, so a 9-year-old scrawny kid getting bitten by a rattlesnake, you'd think that I would remember at least something. I mean, that would be a pretty traumatic experience, but nothing.
So you went through that, then what happened?
Okay, then I went up to the next step, where I was introduced to another group of kids who had moved up through their training processes. Obviously, they were part of something else, and then we were brought together.
And are you in Northern California, or are you in Oregon at this point?
I was in Oregon. I grew up in Oregon, but on occasion, I would be taken down to either Northern or Southern California to go through other training. I did a lot on the coast, where I was actually doing some interaction with dolphins. That was a whole other side of things. When I was taken down to California during summertime, it was all about working with water, working with dolphins.
So you were taken away from your parents, or your parents went down there with the family?
We all went together. It was a vacation, but then I would be taken separately. My sister, again, I don't want to get too much into like my brother and my sister, but let's just say that my sister would be taken to another location, and then my brother would. And sometimes I would return to Oregon, and my sister would stay, or my brother and I would return, my sister would return and I would stay. They mixed it up.
Okay, but your sister is also has been through a program like you, and your brother is an autistic who is absolutely brilliant and working on the secret space program. So let's at least say that.
Well, yeah, okay. I don't want to say names, but yes, I will say this. My sister was part of a separate program that she was selected at a very young age.
And she has some memories?
She's got more than I do.
Okay.
My sister and I spent several days together doing nothing but talking about this. She revealed more to me than I had any idea of as far as her. And then we in turn discussed our brother, who is still actively involved. But it's a difficult and complicated situation that we're trying to figure out how to deal with.
Okay. Okay, so from there, you said you joined another group of kids who somehow made it up to another level. And what did that level consist of at that point?
This level was interesting. This level consisted of a lot of dark things, and I still don't know why. We were introduced to this occult type group that had their own encampments that we would go to, where a lot of dark rituals were practiced. There was this location that specifically my sister and I would be taken to by these older people. I don't remember how much older. And where we were taken, and there was this pathway that we would have to go down to that was very dark, and you would almost feel drained in some way. Then a lot of what I originally thought were hallucinations, where I was seeing things, I was having to drink certain things or having some violent reactions to me. I was becoming a very different person. I was going through a lot of pain. I remember a lot of pain. I just remember a lot of dark, you could say evil, ritualistic things that I was subjected to.
So it sounds like the typical Illuminati indoctrination of a young person.
I would say so, yes.
And I'm assuming you're not saying it, but it sounds like there were sexual rituals involved here.
Yes, there was. But that also was going on at a younger age, where I would be taken to which was a Catholic church, which there is, not to say that the whole Catholic Church is evil, but there is a sect of the Catholic Church that's run by someone that's known as the Black Pope that has very much involvement with a lot of the projects done all around the world. The Black Pope in the black side of the Vatican has had a very vested interest in monoculture projects. So yes, I was subjected to dark sexual rituals and other things at this certain church where I would have to go to at night. There was a lot that transpired at night. Again, when I got older, and even when I was 11, 12, we would be given assignments, training exercises. And so I would have people come over to my house. My mother was under the impression that this was just like a sleepover, young boy sleepover. But we would have gear that was provided to us. I'm talking like, imagine tactical gear for a young kid. And we would have various assignments to go steal a car from a specific location, from a specific place, and deliver it to another place. Also, invading into a house and grabbing something else. They were testing our skills. Could we get in and could we get out quietly? Could we work cohesive as a group?
Okay, and how many kids were in a group?
At this point, there were 6.
Okay, and do you remember those children at all?
I remember their faces. I don't remember their names.
Okay.
I do remember faces.
Okay. So, fast forward, is there anything else before the time when you were told to enlist?
There is one other incident that I would like to share. We had a house that was funded by the government. It was like a little, you could say it was a getaway house for R&R that we could use at any time we wanted. And it was located on a lake up in Northern Oregon, and there was one week in particular during the summertime where they gave us a full week off, and they told us to go to the house. This house, literally, you walk in and it was filled with alcohol. Now, this is when I'm 16. It's filled with alcohol, it was filled with food, it was even filled with any drugs. Anything you wanted, they provided. Now, let me just try to make this quick. We had a boathouse. It was literally on the lake. And of course, the boathouse rested on the water. So this will explain there was no air gaps underneath the boathouse. It was just solid water. A natural rock formation caused like the snake-like form, almost like a cavern that you could swim from one side of the boathouse to the other. Well, I always loved being in the water and holding my breath for a long time. We had a platform that we jump off of. Now, I jumped off the platform on one of the many times I did, and I went underneath. And then I simply, the next thing I remember is resurfacing. But the problem is when I resurfaced, there were other people on this training team, the other kids. Two of the guys were frantically in the water looking for me. And this time we did have two women, two girls that were part of it, and they were a little bit freaked out. And I said, what's the problem? One of the guys who I do remember, his name David, said, we thought you had drowned. And I said, what do you mean? He said, we went underneath there, Aaron. We looked for you. You were nowhere to be seen. I said, well, how long was I gone? And David's response was about 12 minutes. I don't know what happened. I really don't know what transpired. But I do remember them telling me that, and they were definitely in a panic.
Okay.
That happened maybe a month before I was finally told where I was going to go, as far as the military is concerned.
So how were you told where you were going to go? By the military or by your father or who?
No, I received a package in the mail. Big manila envelope. I opened it up and it had some documents in there with some instructions saying, come to this address, and I had a car at this time, saying, come to this address at this time on this day. And it happened to be right across the river from where I lived in Portland, Oregon, in Vancouver, Washington. So I went there, and it was a Coast Guard recruiting office. With everything that I had been doing prior to that, I'd never even heard of the Coast Guard. I had never heard, I didn't even know that this was a branch of the military. So I go in, and there was a few other people there. I'm guessing that they were, prospective prospects, looking to join. And as I walk in, a gentleman walks up to me. I didn't even introduce myself, and he goes, hello, Aaron, we've been expecting you. He shakes my hand, he takes me into a back room. They shut the door. And there was him, a senior chief, which is a high-ranking enlisted member of the Coast Guard, E9, and there was one other person there. I don't remember if they were in uniform or not. But they sat me down and they proceeded to tell me that based on everything that had happened prior to that, all the evaluation, all the testing, all the training, that it had been decided that I would fit to be in the Coast Guard because of future operations that had already been selected for me. And that I would be joining the Coast Guard at a certain time. And that date was selected to be, it was September 30th of 96. So 2 years, they're telling me 2 years in advance that I'm going to be in the military. And
okay, what was your reaction?
Fine.
Why? Why were you so open to it, do you know?
I grew up in a way to where violence, training, being told what to do was normal. Most 5-year-old kids, most kids are playing with G.I. Joes, Legos, learning T-ball, soccer. When I was that age, I was handling knives, learning how to take apart shotguns, and learning rappelling, cold water training, ice water submersion. I was doing basically the waterboarding. This was normal for me. I didn't know any other life. So for me to say fine was just, this is the next step in the process of what I've been doing my whole life.
Okay. So it never occurred to you, even at that age, though, to say no or to rebel?
Not at all.
Did you discuss it with your parents at all?
It wasn't really a discussion. It was, and I didn't tell them until I was a year later. I don't remember if I was instructed. I don't think I was instructed. I think it was just something I did on my own. I don't know. They may have already known. Who knows? But no, when the time came, I told them, I said, listen, in September 30th, which was the summer after I graduated from I should say graduated from high school. That's a whole nother interesting thing. I said, I'm going, and this is what I'm doing. And the reaction from my father was, I think, of acceptance, and my mother, she had a very hesitant reaction. I'm not quite, there's still a lot of fuzziness, but I do remember that her reaction was a little bit worrisome.
Okay, but did you even consider going to college?
No. College was not an option.
Because you'd been trained in a certain way, or because you didn't consider it academically? Were you...
I'd like to quote a General Robert Regale, who recalled me back in 2008. When he sat me down at a desk at Camp Pendleton and told me, goes, Aaron, you will never have a normal job until we have used you to the fullest extent. You are an investment and an asset for purposes that are yet to be revealed, or something to that extent. Basically, he said that I will never be able to have a normal job, and in a way, he's right, because of the way I've been blacklisted. I could get into so many details of me actually trying to use the VA because of my real military career to go to college, which was completely banned. I was blacklisted from that. I have tried to get normal jobs when I was first figuring out who I was, even before I really knew who I was, when I just thought I was insane, where I would get hired on to high-paying jobs, and then the next thing you know it, they would receive some phone call, and then I would be called in and said, we can't. I have been basically made, in a way, a slave to the pension that I receive, which I got under very unusual conditions as well.
Okay, so let's go back to at least, just very briefly at any rate, you said something about high school itself. So what was strange about high school?
I remember being called into the principal's office about a month before I was supposed to graduate. Now, I didn't really attend high school. In fact, for most of the last 2 years of high school, junior and senior year, I wasn't at school. It was training. That was it. I would go
Were you
weeks.
conscious of the fact that you weren't in high school? I mean, with this, were you...
I was registered at the high school, but I would receive instructions, and it was during the time when school was going on, because training was really getting picked up. So yeah, I was aware, and I didn't care because I knew that I had to follow the instructions that I was given by the people who were covering the logistics of everything that I was supposed to be doing. And I guess I just somehow knew that I would be taken care of. I don't really know how I knew, I just knew. So to go back, I get called in the principal's office, who obviously had no knowledge of the situation, who sat me down and said, you know, we can't graduate you. He said, you have, and he showed me, something crazy like, 158 some odd days of unexcused absences, and that was the ones where they just simply were able to, where they caught it. Because I know that I was gone a lot more days than that. And I remember just shrugging it off. And then something obviously happened, because then the next day, no, it wasn't the next day, shortly after that, and it actually made the local newspaper, everything was kept on computer. Even though this is 1996, everything was kept on computers at this time at the high school I was at. Their databanks got wiped out. Everything was lost.
Okay.
So they had no alternative. They didn't have the proof to say, well, this student, Aaron McCOLLUM, has all these has enough unexcused absences that technically we should just expel him, but instead we're just not going to graduate him.
So what happened? Are you saying they graduated you?
Yeah.
Okay.
They did. I received a diploma and everything.
Okay. And do you have a record of that yourself or not?
I used to, but a lot of the property that I had was confiscated. Everything that I owned prior, from childhood up until December 2005, everything that I owned was taken.
When was it taken?
At some point between, I'm guessing, July of 2005 and December of 2005.
Meaning it was stolen from your house, or?
Meaning the ones that I was working for took it. It was obviously,
Okay, and we're getting ahead of ourselves.
I know, we're really getting ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, but just to fill in the blank here, so that we don't miss it, who were you working for in 2005 such that they took what you had? Do you know?
Well, I was working I was working two sides of things. I was wearing my hat as Petty Officer McCollum in the U.S. Coast Guard, and I was wearing my other hat as serial number 13-03957 for Project SEAGATE, which was an underwater facility located off the west side of Puerto Rico.
Okay, so let's go back now. You've enlisted in the military. The 2 years have passed. It's time for you to report. I'm assuming you report. Is that what happens?
Oh, yes.
Okay, and at this point you graduated from high school?
Yes.
Okay, so was it right after your graduation? Did you graduate in June and then report in September?
No, I graduated, well, yes, I did. I graduated in June and then I reported in September, yes. I literally 3 weeks after I turned 18. I turned 18 on September 6th of 96, and then that same month on the 30th I reported.
Okay, so you reported, and then what happened?
Well, I went to regular Coast Guard boot camp, and then I reported to a unit that, even when I reported the unit, the commanding officer there thought it was quite odd that I was there, because at this time, this unit that I was at, nobody went there straight out of boot camp. This was a very a special unit that did a whole wide range of things, from law enforcement, some drug interdiction, but mostly special op search and rescue. So, and this, because we don't really need to get into the regular Coast Guard side, but I'll just say this: every unit that I went to be regular Aaron McCollum Coast Guard were special units that were very hard to get, and I never selected them. They would be selected for me. And even on 3 units that I helped create, that I helped stand up, these units. So I was put into a very unique position, and the reason why I was put in this unique position was I would be selected and placed in 2 places where I could do, you could say, the black operation side of things.
Okay, but you were put into a unit, you said it was somewhat sophisticated, and there was, I'm assuming, no one else at your young age or whatever?
At that time, no. A little bit, about a year later, they started to bring in a few other people my age, but at that time, there was no one close to my age.
Okay, and so how were you treated in those units? These are, I'm assuming, the normal special forces.
Very well. Very well. Well,
what does it mean to be treated very well?
Well, I mean, okay. Even back then, hazing would occur. You get a new guy in, and maybe they tie you up and, smack you around a little bit. They're not doing it out of being malicious. It's kind of like a welcome to the club. That didn't really occur with me. There were a lot of missions that took place that would normally be deemed as questionable or not according to regulation, where if someone else normally Coast Guard did it, they would probably receive some kind of non-judicial punishment, as it's called, and I didn't receive any of that. Basically, I could get away with anything and not receive any kind of consequences.
Okay, did you have friends in the unit?
Eventually I made friends.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Okay, and so this is your so-called normal, even though it's special ops, this was your so-called normal above board operation.
Yes.
And this was, at this age you are 18, you're going out on search and rescue in the, what, Oregon, Washington?
Off the Oregon coast, yes. Oregon, Washington coast, yes.
Okay, and then what's the Black Ops side? When did that start?
The Black Ops didn't really start until '99. So really my first, you could say basically my first 2 years, because I didn't really report to my first unit until it was December 12th of '96. So that's when I was introduced to Operation Spyglass in 1999.
Was it called that?
Yes.
So it was a Black Ops program. Did you know it was Black Ops as opposed to normal?
Oh yeah. I would receive the full briefing. They told me exactly what was going on. They also explained to me how it was used, as there was the regular military known Operation Spyglass, which consisted of mainly Special Task Force for, international drug running, or special interest people that were war criminals, or criminals that perhaps, like the U.S. Marshals couldn't obtain, so they would ask the military, which the military does this a lot. They'll go in and out of countries and grab people of special interest. Not in my lab, but it's for, other purposes.
All right, but were you going into other countries?
At that time, I was based out of Vancouver, British Columbia, which is actually one of the main hubs for the Pacific Rim operations. But at that time, I was doing a lot of work in Canada. There was a special interest with some targets in Canada. But then there was a few times where I was taken to Hawaii and a few other places around the rim.
Okay.
But I was based mainly out of, when I was doing that operation, it was Vancouver, British Columbia.
Okay, when you say there were targets in Canada, what do you mean by a target?
Oh gosh, that is such a detailed thing, and I just spent 2 hours on an interview talking about this. Military abductions, and I'll try to be brief, there are several targets. One, you have people that, let's say you have someone that is a remote viewer that was brought up as I was and is part of one of the many sub-projects under Mark Ultra. Well, let's say you have a scientist that was working on it. This said person, maybe they go out on a mission, or they defect, they run away. Programming is broken down and they don't want to be part of it anymore. So the team I was with do one of two things. We either terminate the subject, or we go and we grab them and we bring them back for reprogramming because they're still an asset and they still need to be used. So termination or military abduction.
Okay, and
that's one of many reasons for an abduction.
All right. Did you know that they were going to be terminated? Did you participate in the termination? Yes. And did you know who it was? In other words, did you know that this was an asset that had gone wrong, so to speak? We
would know all the information. We would receive their dossier because we had to know, pretty much everything about them.
Okay, and is this the Black Ops side?
Yes.
Okay.
No, the Coast Guard side had nothing to do with this side.
Okay.
That was just that. You could say that was my cover. That was my front.
But you participated in the front organization for only 2 years, or simultaneously the whole time?
Simultaneously the whole time. Because there were some Coast Guard operations that worked together. It was a balance. They do this with people like me, and it's not just the Coast Guard. They had people like me that went into the Navy, the Army, the Air Force, and the Marines. Sometimes I would even have them go into the CIA, FBI. They were infiltrated everywhere.
So let me just describe what I think you're talking about, and you tell me where I'm wrong.
Okay.
So they would send you on an operation that was an official kind of operation that was on the sort of official side.
Yes.
And your group would be working all the different angles, but you would basically be sort of like a double agent, and you would go out on sort of other missions that were tangential to that particular mission.
Exactly. Think of it as the known operation, the sanctioned operation, was the umbrella to disguise what we were really doing. And it wasn't always a solo mission. You know, there was a team, but it wasn't until 2001 that things really kicked off for me as far as Project SEAGATE, and then the team that I was with, that I was in charge of, where things got very in depth. And basically 2001 was the set point for everything that I had done up until that point, from the 3 years old up until 2000. There was three things that I forgot to mention, just because there's so much, and I'm trying to get everything in the allotted time. So let me just go with, let's start with the scar. There's a scar right here. I'm sure you can probably see it.
Yes. That
is been a mystery. The scar, here's the story I was told, that during delivery I somehow got stuck, and they had to use metal forceps to grab my head in order to pull me out, you could say. I've had doctors examine it. I've even done a lot of research on the internet, because you can actually look up like forceps scars on babies that have had that actual occurrence. None of them match this. This scar on occasions has raised, it's done things, changed color, even changed shape. Now I have quite a few scars on my body, and usually even a little trace amount of hair will grow over scar tissue, at least the ones that I have. Yet I was born with this, and hair has never grown over it. Now, again, a lot of this is theory, but the fact that my parents don't remember the day I was born, each give me a different story. And when I asked my dad in person, "Dad, tell me about how I got this scar, and tell me about when I was born," he started going off on an explanation, which I already knew, was actually about a situation with my brother when he was born. And I said, so then I thought, no, Dad, okay, maybe he's older, maybe he's... I said, no, come on, Dad, tell me. And then he stopped, and he couldn't remember. And my mother can't remember. And then I'm told that when I was delivered and there was this procedure was done to me, that my mother didn't do anything about it. What mother wouldn't freak out if their newborn baby comes out and has got like a big gash in their head? I had been told by one inside source who, it was basically, he gave me a brief message and then disappeared, that some kind of surgical procedure was done to me while I was in womb. Many theories have come out about what exactly they did. Everything from some people saying, oh, I think it was genetic modification, to an implant, to whatever. I don't know. I'm still working on that one. But
okay. What hospital were you at?
Well, my birth certificate says the Kaiser Permanente in Fontana, California. But when you have family members saying, Aaron, you really need to question the legitimacy of that, and even another family member saying that they have doubts I was even born on September 6th, 1978. Family members that I do trust, and I don't trust only but a few of my family, which I'm sorry to say, but it's true.
Okay. Are you talking, I mean, I don't understand. I thought you lived in Oregon.
I did. Again, here's what I was told. I should have said this in the beginning. I was told that I was born in Fontana, California, and that when I was still an infant, I don't know how old, I think I was told 6 months old, my family suddenly moved up to Oregon.
Okay. And are you younger than your brother and sister?
I'm the youngest.
Okay.
Yes. My sister's the oldest, my brother's in the middle, and I'm the youngest.
So, in essence, your birth would have been the most recent for your parents in the timeline, because you were the youngest.
Oh, yes.
So, it's interesting that they don't remember. Did your mother have a story associated with your birth or not?
I've heard several different things. My sister's asked, and she's heard several different stories. We don't know which one is the fact.
Okay, and I don't know if you want to answer this question, but did your mother use medication?
No.
And what did she do for a living, if anything?
She, if I remember right, gave up college to be with my dad. And here's another thing. My dad can't even remember how he met my mother. Another thing that I recently found out, along with a whole...
Is your father got a drinking problem?
No.
Is he on medication?
No. He doesn't even smoke cigarettes.
Interesting. But he has these memory losses.
He's got a lot of memory losses.
Okay, so let's go to the next thing, which is, you said, okay, we've got the scar, we've got the birth. I guess the only third thing was that you said you just wanted to make sure and say that when you were young, around the age of 9, you started going on operations?
Oh, no, that was
as an observer?
That was older. I'm sorry. This was something I wanted, and this directly related to the military abduction side of the unit that I was with when we were under Operation Spyglass. It didn't happen all the time, but on maybe 4 or 5 occasions, just me, not the other people, the other kids, they were assigned to do other things later on. I would actually participate as an observer to live exercises, live military abductions.
When you say live military abductions, can you explain a little more about that?
Imagine, you know how people can go on a ride along with the police? They go to the police station, they ask they're interested in becoming a cop, so they don't wear any guns or anything, but they ride with the cop and they do a full shift. Imagine it's something similar to that, but not all night, just for one operation where you're observing what they're doing. It's kind of like furthermore acclimating to what is to come for you.
And how old were you?
That happened between 16 and 17.
Okay, and when you say a military abduction, did you ride in a UFO, for example?
I didn't ride in any UFOs at that time.
Okay, but did you ride in a craft of any
Yes.
kind to go on the abduction?
Yes.
What kind of craft?
On 2 occasions, it was a military helicopter. I was younger then. I didn't really know. I don't know what kind, but it was definitely a helicopter. Where I stayed in the helicopter. That's the thing. I didn't like go with them, and I was just there as an observer. That's it. It was just.
Okay, but
I'm not even sure really the exact. The only thing I can guess was that it was so that I would get an idea of how this ran.
Okay, but I'm assuming you went in the helicopter. There's not a lot of room in a helicopter. They're picking up. What are they doing? Picking up.
They're picking up
a child.
On 2 of the occasions, it was women. It was young women.
Okay, so they pick them up, and you don't go with them to do the pickup. You stay in the helicopter.
I stayed in the helicopter.
They bring the person into the helicopter.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And we went to the facility. I stayed in the helicopter. They dropped them off, and then I was returned home.
Okay, and when you say the facility, where was the facility? Do you know?
This facility that we went to was in northern Washington, somewhere in the area of Fort Lewis, which is a major Army base up there.
Okay, so you think it was on an Army base?
I don't remember. I mean, it was definitely a facility of some kind. I remember buildings. I remember military personnel being there. I remember that was somewhere up in. The only reason I remember this is because in when was it? In the early part of 2006, I went up to Seattle because I had somehow come in contact with someone I worked with prior to. And this is when I'm not remember anything. I don't remember how we wound up, but the person recognized me somehow through some means. So I drove up to Seattle, and I remember driving up past on I-5, going past the Dow Chemical headquarters and then Fort Lewis, and then remember getting some pretty intense visions or flashbacks. But again, at this time, you have to remember, really from 2006 until the beginning of 2008, I just thought I was nuts. I mean, when you're waking up with cold sweats, when you're walking around and then next thing you know, you're in a town or another state and you don't remember how you got there, or when you're waking up and you've got blood on your hands and you don't remember how you got that. I mean, that's a pretty hard thing for someone to deal with, that they have no idea even what they don't even remember their childhood. They don't remember a year before that.
Okay, so this is actually moving things forward quite a bit, because at the point that we left off now, to fast forward to this point where you were going through these programs, you were already going on missions in Canada, that you're talking about picking up these people that were basically renegade agents of the government that had gone bad.
And not all of them were. Sometimes it was people of special interest, sometimes it was children. There was a wide variety, but you know, that would take a lot to... It took me 2 hours in an interview just a week ago to explain some of it.
When you say you went to pick these people up and bring them back, you brought them back to where? Okay,
when I was actually fully part of doing military abductions, we would receive directives and orders, and you could say a dossier on a certain person and or group of people, because it does happen in group settings too. We would know what reason it was for. We would go, we would find them. We didn't always know where they were. We had to locate them, and then we would bring them back to a designated installation. Sometimes it was underground. Sometimes it was a regular military installation. Sometimes it was an above ground, you could say, secret installation. One of the common places that I would take people to is an underground facility that is in the northern bay of San Francisco, at what is above ground, called a naval weapons munition base, but actually there's a much greater facility underneath. Okay.
And when you took the people there, first of all, how did you go? Again, are we talking, because you said that at first you said it was sort of half the normal part of the Coast Guard division, and then the other part you said was like the Black Ops.
Yes.
So in what kind of vehicle at this point were you going?
Okay, at this point, this was definitely highly advanced vehicle. TR-3Bs.
The black triangles?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Were commonly used. We use those a lot. The thing about those specific craft is that light configuration can be changed to make it look like a normal plane, and even the sound emitted from it can be altered. So if it's really dark out, what you see lights that appear to be maybe like a 747. It sounds like a 747. I'm not saying this is always the case, but there's always that chance that it could be a TR-3B. It could, well, of course, there's a new model now. The old model has already been, is far outdated. They got the new Aurora, which is oh, I have it somewhere with the classification, but it's far more advanced. I mean, we're talking anywhere in the world in under 12 minutes.
Okay, but okay, I'm assuming you're not an expert on military aircraft, but at the same time you rode in this vehicle. So can you describe anything about its capability in terms of, you know, in other words, could it, at that time, and we're talking, I don't know, what year?
I know what you're talking about. We're talking, I mean, I rode those things off and on from 1999 until, you know, 2005. Okay. So, and I know what you're referring. Directional, yes, multi-directional. They could move any way because of the.
And what about in terms of the speed? Do you know how fast it could go? You know, could it go faster than light speed?
I know that on some occasions. I remember going from the United States to Azerbaijan, that country, and we reached it in under 30 minutes. And that's pretty much on the other side of the globe.
Yeah. So these abductions that you were doing, were they, in other words, you said terminate or bring them back?
That was two of the categories under the conditions of, yes. Termination, well, a termination was not a military abduction. Termination was a termination. The whole point of the abduction was to take them alive, bring them back for whatever purpose. But there were also a scope of things. There's also, it goes on to, and again, I described this in this other interview I just did, where you're talking about occasionally people slip through the cracks. Children, even adults. Every human, every baby that's born in the United States, DNA sample is taken. That DNA sample then goes into a network. That network can be accessed by special projects. Through decades and decades, they have managed to where, knowing the history of the family lineage, they can tell on the basic DNA level the possibilities of what this child is capable of. It's not a perfect system though. Occasionally children do slip through the cracks. So let's just use an example. Someone hears about maybe a child with telepathy or doing telekinesis, or even, you hear of a little girl that's at a shopping mall that screams, all of a sudden windows shatter. Well then, one of the many special projects takes interest and they want that girl, they want that young woman, they want that man. So they say, okay, go get him. If my team selected to do so, we're given the information, we go, we find this person, we bring them back to whatever designated facility. Now they may not be gone forever. It could be because you have what's called subjects of opportunity. They're taken, they're used for whatever purpose, we give them false implied memories, slip them something, they're returned back. And maybe we never use them again. Maybe we decide we need them in a month. Okay. Or not for years. That's one of many.
Did you dress up a certain way? Did you were you working with ETs?
Yes. There were 3 conditions. Now you had actual plain daylight abductions where you could either be masked as like a police or some kind of official member, and where you draw them into a situation to grab them, or I could be dressed like this. Obviously I didn't have the earrings or as many of the tattoos at the time, but we would use several different drugs. One of them was called scopamine. Scopamine I could literally take and dip it on the edge of a toothpick, and let's say you're my target, Carrie. I've tracked you down, you're at a cafe. I can either wait till you get to go use the restroom and I could put some of this minute amount in your coffee, or I could literally actually bump into you and rub it on your skin. I then wait for it to come into effect. Then I walk over to you, and this is how this drug works. It's very dangerous. I say, hi Carrie, I'm Aaron. Now, you don't know me at all. You've never met me, but you react, you say, hi. I said, well listen, come with me. You come with me happily. You pay your check, you grab your purse, you come with me. Willingly, I take you in my car or in your car or whatever. I take you to a facility, then whatever's been designated for you happens. If you are returned back, you're returned back and you have no memory. That's what the drug does. It's a very volatile, very dangerous drug, and it was one of the, you could say it was one of the drugs of my choice when I was doing abductions.
Okay, so were you the leader of these groups?
The team that happened after 2001, yes, I was the team leader.
Why were you the team leader? Do you know?
Because I was really good at my job.
What does being good at that job mean?
I had a very high success rate. It was above 97%.
Okay, and did you have you didn't have the earrings and the tattoo at that time?
No, I didn't have the earrings. I didn't have the tattoos on my neck. I didn't have them on my hands, but I did have a lot on my arms. You were talking about uniform. I don't remember if I sent you a picture of the uniform that I wore, and I was able to obtain parts of my old uniform, one of my old uniforms, through some other means. Black gloves, full black turnout gear, flag vest, hood, goggles, whole 9 yards. We weren't allowed to wear watches. You weren't allowed to wear anything that would separate you, even no markations, no American flag, no U.S. Coast Guard, no nothing. When I was actually on facility at Pro-C, we did have a certain symbol that we wore, which was the SEAGATE symbol. But so we were completely black. We were of non-denomination. I did have 2 females on my team. When they were suited up, you couldn't even tell that they were women.
Okay, but you can't take somebody and rub them with this drug in being suited up like that, right?
No, that in that uniform was strictly night operations. That was done for night ops.
Okay, and what is a night op?
A night op would be, well, let's use this place for example. You're here, you're at home, you're asleep, and the moment of opportunity, we've received the green light. So if this place had an alarm system, we would obviously disable it. I would have, and for this kind of operation, I'd probably only bring maybe a couple more people, maybe 2 or 3 other people on my team. We would have some come up the balcony this way. We would have, and then come up through the front entrance. We would go into where you were asleep. We would shoot a cocktail into you, which would be a combination of either scopamine, GBH, LSD, or BZ, or one of, and there's reasons for that. If we wanted to make it appear that was an alien abduction to create a hallucinogenic effect. And then we would carry you out, we would lock everything up, take you to the vehicle, the craft, and then we'd be gone.
What about the neighbors and dogs and things like that?
Oh, we weren't concerned with that.
Why?
Because we could get in and get out without them noticing.
Okay.
Complete in and out without any sound. You know, even being able to, you know, you're talking about even picking a lock at night. Dogs will even sleep through that. I mean, you can be that quiet.
Okay. So you were going on these operations that you were calling my labs, military abductions, and you said you're working with ETs. Which
Grays.
ETs? Grays?
Grays.
Okay, and do you recall this, or
no?
is this...
I do recall some of this. These are things that I had a little bit difficulty coming to terms with, or even accepting, no more than a couple years ago. And again, and a lot of this, okay, a lot of these memories were reconfirmed when I was called back to duty in 2008, when I still didn't know who I was, and all of a sudden I've got these military personnel who are taking me to Camp Pendleton, where I'm meeting with this general, and he literally opens up what he had of a dossier of me, and they're showing operations, they're showing images, they're showing things that I was a part of. They showed me that on my NSA file it says, Petty Officer, 2nd Class Aaron E. McCOLLUM, serial number 13-03957, killed in action 1999. So according to whoever doesn't need to know about me, I technically have died in action at some point in 1999.
But you're still running around town with this name and so on and so forth. Okay, I mean, because I also want to address why you've been allowed to get away with what you're doing.
I haven't entirely been allowed to get away with what I've been doing. I have received threats. Certain family members have received threats, and I myself have had attempts on my life as recently as, that had to have been 5 months ago, when I was hit by a car at I mean, not full speed obviously, but the witnesses said that the car was going 35, 40 miles an hour and it hit me dead on. And
were you in a car at the time it hit you?
No, I was walking. It hit me straight on. I was going across a crosswalk where the light was go for me, and the car peeled around the corner and then came up, and it just happened so fast, and I flew over the car, hit the ground. I blacked out. I woke up in the ER, and with many times before, the doctor sat there and said, I have no idea how you don't have any broken bones. You don't have any stitches. I didn't even have really any bruises. I pretty much walked away from it. They took me because they didn't know who I was, and it was, standard procedure, obviously. The ambulance shows up, they put me in the neck brace. I do remember telling them, no, I'm fine. They're like, no, please. So I'm just like, okay, I'll let you guys go along with this.
Did you question at any point what you were doing?
No. You don't question when you're grown up to never question. You just do. You just act. You see, people like Duncan, myself, and even another former teammate, Axe, I'll refer to her as that, you're raised and you're conditioned through even electroshock therapy of splitting the alters, where Now, of course, if you do an operation in Ultra, which I did many that obviously I don't remember, but I know because of missing time, you're robotic. But even in the person that you see now, that actively did black operations, you don't question it, you don't feel anything. You're not allowed to. And if you do, well, you better not show it, because then you're going to get reprogrammed. I've been able to get in contact, well, I was in contact with a number of people that were on my team. And after contact was made, suddenly these people disappeared. Or I would go from trying to get information out of them because they maybe remember a little bit more than me, and then the next day contacted me and they're going, I don't know who you are, please stop contacting me.
Okay, yeah.
So I have been completely, they've completely taken me out. Now you said, how am I able to survive of all that? That's a whole nother story we could get into another time, but let's just say that I had a guy show up when I was living in Phoenix. He knew everything about me. He said that he worked for the company that's telling me CIA or something even more further, and he disagreed with what took place with me, and he was the guy responsible for setting up what is basically my pension, the money that I get now. He came and he went. I don't know who he was, some good Samaritan, but without him, I don't know what I would be able to do.
Let's fast forward now, because
okay.
We've talked about the military abductions that you were going on, and that was during what years?
It actually happened off and on from 1999 to 2005. That was one of my many collateral duties.
Okay, but
I was a multi-mission person.
I understand. And then you did work with Project SEAGATE.
Yes.
So now we need to kind of go in that direction.
Okay, let me just give a little bit of history of Project SEAGATE first. And that'll help people understand. About 30 years ago, the Navy and NOAA, which is the National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration, who does a lot of research on the water, they were doing some surveying in the area of the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, that whole area, some underwater surveying. Why they were doing that, I don't have the details, but I know that they were. And they had ground penetrating radar that they were using. They found something. They found something big underneath the seabed off the west coast of Puerto Rico. So excavation commenced, and they found what was to appear to be a very large abandoned facility, not of human technology. Now, at this time, of course, the United States government already had a treaty with certain extraterrestrial beings, with the Greys, with the reptilians, and even a few other that had taken interest. So, working with them, they were able to uncover and they had to reverse engineer it, because even today, they're still not sure who or what built this.
So it wasn't a gray base?
No, absolutely not. No, this was not gray technology. But they were able to figure out through trial and error and a lot of reverse engineering.
Okay, and you know this information how?
I know this information from 2 people that I worked with prior to, and 1 person that was an operator. An operator by means, this was a person who actually was a scientist, more of an engineer, that was on facility.
Meaning worked at this facility once it was activated? This underwater base?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And the underwater base, is that what you call Project SEAGATE, or that's called...
Well,
is there another
Project SEAGATE was the name of the project, the operations that were ran there. Think of it like, okay, you've got MK Ultra, Mark Ultra, that has many, many sub-projects. Project SEAGATE itself had several sub-projects.
So this was a sub-project?
This was a sub-project that had sub-projects itself. This is what makes it so complicated, because a project is designed like Montauk, and then they discover all these other things that they do, so they branch off. This is something they do purposely because it's hard to track. The base itself was actually called PROSEA, PROSEA. That's just what that's what they called it. I know that there was another name. There was like a serial number code for the base, but I don't remember what that was.
Okay, and this was under the water.
It wasn't. Okay, there are now. They have parts of it that are on the seabed floor, but most of the facility is actually underneath the seabed. So it's an underwater / underground facility.
Okay. Now, when you say it was called PROSEA, where did you get that information? Did you remember it, or was it told to you?
That was what I was shown as part of the dossier I was shown back in 2008 when I was being recalled. So they figured, you got to recall a guy. I'm sitting there really freaking out. We're going to show this guy who he really is.
Did you have no memory when you were freaking out at that point, or did you have some?
I had what I only thought were hysterical hallucinations. I really thought this is why, which I haven't talked about this much, but you know, I made an attempt to kill myself in 2006 because I just had it. I'd had it with not sleeping, with waking up, with these night terrors, screaming, sweats, flashbacks, coming in and out of consciousness, waking up in one city, or you know, showing up in a different city. It was chaos. My life was chaos.
How many altars do you think you have, or do you know?
I'll tell you what I've been told, and I'll tell you what it's been actually factually logged. I have actual witnesses, and several more whistleblowers that have talked on Project Camelot, and others have done other people that I worked with in the past. I've had about 12 separate altars that were witnessed. What I was told, is that I have somewhere in the number of 36 separate altars. But I haven't been able to get enough substantial evidence, but I have substantial evidence on 12.
You're going into this base. What was happening at the base, and how were you involved?
Okay. Here's where things get a little interesting. The base had like I said, had sub-projects. One of the sub-projects, which was part of what is known as the Omega program, and the Omega program does a multitude of things. It creates soulless beings, so I'm talking about cloning humans that do not have a consciousness. They are basically a host. They are a shell that can be used to put the consciousness of another person in there. That's used for
And this is the same Omega project that was documented on the Heather material.
Yes.
Okay, and you've connected with Ben. So
I've connected with Ben, and you could say I've connected with Heather via Ben.
Okay.
That's a whole nother interesting thing, because Heather has a direct connection to Project SEAGATE that I had no idea about.
Okay. And we want to talk about that. So
Sure.
at some point, you know, we're going to diverge to talk about that in a little more depth. But at this point, let's answer this question so far as to what was going on there and what was your involvement.
Okay. So the Omega project, which the Omega is again a classification for genetically engineered beings. The one that Dr. Deagle was on was with the Human Jackal program. Okay, and that was basically a super soldier program where they were combining human and jackal DNA, which jackal pound for pound are one of the strongest animals. Project SEAGATE adopted an aquatic side of it, where they were combining human and dolphin DNA to create, you could say, an aquatic type super soldier who had the abilities of telepathy, echolocation, being able to hold the breath for an extremely long time underwater, being even better at adapting to cold. Dolphins themselves can actually change their body heat depending on if they go up to the Arctic or if they're down in the equator.
Okay, so are we talking about, you're saying genetically engineered, are they using human and dolphins, but are they ending up to look more like which?
There was a wide range. Initially, the project, as in with a lot of genetic manipulation, they had a lot of failures where you get things like the thing that I really, it disgusts me how they label it, the pictures of the Panamanian monster, which is not a monster. I think I showed you those pictures, and those pictures, if not, I'll get them to you, are of what you could say more of not a desired creation due to the project. Occasionally underwater field exercises would happen and one would get away. This is when they expanded to where all exercises were done at a huge sea pool, is what they called it, that's actually in the bay, so that they weren't actually out in the open. They were more in an enclosure.
But are they looking human?
Well, they do two models. They do a model that looks closer to dolphin,
right,
and they have a model that's closer, much more closer to human. Yeah.
Okay, and what was your involvement?
My involvement with that was several reasons. One, I worked with the actual full-blooded dolphins because part of the program was I was selected in a very small group of people, part of the Super Soldier program, to learn certain traits that dolphins could do. One of them, which I think I talked about in the first interview, was echolocation synchronicity. What does that mean? That means that basically it means that the dolphins, which were more or less the instructors, were teaching humans how to do echolocation. This is not fantasy. This is something that really happens. In fact, it can happen in normal state. There's a 5-year-old blind boy who just made it on the news a couple weeks ago, who his mother was taking him out with dolphins, and the dolphins taught him how to echolocate. Now this boy doesn't need a cane. He walks around and he does echolocation all the time.
Okay, but echolocation is what? Is
echolocation is, you could say, biological radar. They put out a frequency, it bounces off an object, it comes back, and therefore they can measure how big it is and how far away it is. It's what sonar is.
Okay. All right, so you're saying you worked with dolphins to do what?
To learn how to do echolocation, and as well, I also was one of the... All right, let's get into the real bread and butter of Project SEAGATE then. Now, there was an alien side of things that were done. We can talk about that later. There was the Super Soldier aquatic program with the dolphin-human hybrids, but then there was the real thing. The real aim of Project SEAGATE was that there's a portal.
Okay.
It is a portal that can be used. It was such a unique portal that, as far as I've been told, it's the only one on the planet. At least it's the only active one on the planet, as far as I know, because I don't recall being to any other ones. This portal can be used for interdimensional travel, off-planet travel, and under the right conditions, when it's set up right, can be used for time travel.
Okay, okay.
Now, you're asking, I know, and I'm getting that, sorry. What was my role? The team that I was with, which was called the Sentinels, which was a team of very highly trained people that had abilities to adjust to water in certain ways, because the portal is actually underwater. Now, these SEAGATEs that are located in other places also are underwater. What they had to do initially, about 20 years ago, they had sent some people through, but they weren't returning. And they had everything set up right. To talk about I have a schematic, but to talk about the science behind it, I don't really know. I know that, there was a certain room that was called the dome room, which was the room for creating the coordinates. They had these remote viewers that had another role playing it. They sent drones through the portal, and the drones had, through taking pictures, had discovered that the people on their side had died, sometimes violently. It was not because of a malevolent race. We're not the only planet that has water, but water on different planets has different characteristics, different chemical breakdown, different chemical makeup. So what they started doing was they had these drones that were bringing in samples of this water, and now what they have there, which they've had there for I mean, it was there when I was already there. They had what was called the acclimation room, where you had tanks of water. This is why it'd be good at some point for you to interview Axe, my counterpart, because Axe was part of all of this, and she will give further in depth on some things. The water was of different characteristics, and they would place dolphins and sometimes humans, not the desired dolphins, maybe rejects or humans that were my labs, into this water, see how they would react. People like me, people like Axe, they found were kind of anomalies. We could acclimate to any water. So let's just get to the point. Myself, Axe, and a few others were used to jump through this for more high priority missions.
Okay, missions going to what? Other dimensions? Going time traveling elsewhere in the solar system,
yes,
the universe?
going to part of this facility was also worked in correlation with the naval galactic fleet, and even
Space Command.
The Space Command, which there's a lot of people involved in Space Command. I think the last I heard there was about 600,000 humans, Earth humans, that are part of Space Command, that all have that are part of Majestic and Cosmic.
Okay, well, last you heard from, how did you hear that information?
I heard that from, actually, it was, it's someone that you know. I heard it in a recent interview. I can't remember the name of the person. It'll come to me, maybe even after the interview, I figure, but there's someone, one of your whistleblowers, had mentioned this sometime about a year ago.
Okay, well, it might be the Han Solo individual that we haven't even released the interview yet, but I don't quite know. Maybe that was related to you by one of the other people.
I know it was related through that means, but that's a year old information.
Okay, so you were used to time travel and go on operations where?
All over the place. This is why. Okay, one of the reasons why Duncan, O'Finian, and Axe and I wanted to have a full interview was so that there was some better cooperation, because it's just me talking. It's better if you have other people. There were operations that had been done in Cambodia back in the late 60s that I have memory of being a part of, that Duncan has memories of being a part of, and that Axe have memories of being a part of, and that even Dave Corso has memories of being a part of. Right,
but technically you weren't born then.
Oh no, I wasn't. I was born in '78, according to what I was told and what records I have.
Okay.
Do I have memories of being off-world? Yes. Do I remember exactly where they were? No. Am I working on to find that out? Yes. But it takes time. I'm actually working on what's kind of known as a metaphysical psychic detox, something that was developed specifically for me, which has been opening up a lot of memories and a lot of other unique things. My abilities, I don't want to say, my special relationship with water has been increasing. Everything from someone watching me, someone that you've met, watching me put my hand over a pot of water and a bolt of, like, I don't want to say a bolt, but it was definitely like about an inch away and a thing of electricity shot up into my hand. Another incident where I was in an alternate state, where again, another one of your whistleblowers witnessed, where I had my hand in a bowl of water and this dark matter came out, and then suddenly Duncan is not under this attack that he was under. Carrie, I've had since the first time you and I spoke, I've had so many things come to surface that, I mean, God, we could sit here for 8 hours and maybe get some of it.
If you could sum it up, what is the military doing down there? What's the purpose?
Okay, 3 main things. 1, the Dolphin-Human Hybrid Program, where they're still creating, they're still developing, they're still coming up with advancements, because, and make no mistake, they're building an army, and they're of ones that look more dolphin and ones that look more human. They also, with the Project SEAGATE portal, they use some of these hybrids they make are without souls, So they're used through these remote viewers, the 10 remote viewers that sit in what's called the row of chairs, where they can use them for more expendable missions, where if the body itself gets damaged, they can actually bring back the consciousness of that human into its real body.
Oh, right. And we talked about this in the last interview. In other words, but
I really don't like to compare movies to reality, but that Avatar movie
yeah,
is not out of this world technology.
Yeah.
That is happening right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not just Project SEAGATE. There are other sub-projects that are using the same technology, just for different purposes.
Right.
The base is also, there's a section of Pro-C that is ran and operated by Greys and Reptilian, and not just them, but a few other races as well that have, you could say, decided to jump on the team. They are doing a lot of different projects because Project SEAGATE is also connected to, there is an underground maglev that goes to Autek, which is at Bimini Island. There is also 2 small satellite entrances. They call them satellite entrances. They're small, like hubs. One that's located in St. Croix off of what's called Rainbow Beach, and another one in Water Island in St. Thomas. That actually relates to part of what Duncan was part of back in 2003 and 2004. But what a lot of people don't know, and it's only been mentioned on a few occasions, is there's actually a total of 12 underground bases in the Caribbean. But only 2 of them are ran and where humans are allowed. The other 10 are strictly all exclusive extraterrestrials.
Okay, what about the one off of Catalina? Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am.
Do you think you've been in it?
You know, I've been to Catalina. I remember being to Catalina when I was a kid. In fact, I recently found out from my sister that she and my brother, when they were, I think in junior high, so what's that, like 12, 13? They both were shipped off at separate times to Houston for space camp. But they don't really remember space camp. When I got to that age, I was shipped off to Catalina Island for some kind of marine biology scuba camp thing. That was like the equivalent of space camp, but for that. I remember going to Catalina, but I don't remember what took place or leaving.
Okay.
But I do know that there is, because a lot of USO, underwater or unidentified submersible objects, are seen off of the Catalina. But here's another thing that people may not be aware of that see this. Puerto Rico is one of the major hotspots for UFO and USO sightings in the world. 95% of these sightings that get reported never make it to the media. Because Puerto Rico, off of Puerto Rico, and that whole area in the Caribbean, you're talking 12 underground facilities, and only 2 are ran by the United States, Autek and Pro-C.
Okay. And the other ones are run by off-world
various off-world
ETs.
beings. Not all. They're not all gray and reptilian. There's various ones. Several are benevolent.
Okay. Well, what is? Describe one.
Well, one is the Syrians.
Okay. And what do they look like?
The Syrians are kind of a bluish, a very kind of a light bluish look to them. But then there's other ones that have are more of a, it's like a bluish tannish color. They range from 5'4" to about my height, 6'2". They do have a wide range of hair. They're not like you see in these pictures where you have these pictures on the internet where every race is tall blondes. You know, oh, here's a picture of John, oh, he's tall blonde. Oh, he's Palladian, he's tall blonde. That's not the case at all. One of the other groups is a group that's not well known, that's Lyran. And then the other ones range from, there is one that's Greys.
Right.
There's
okay, but
there's another one that's actually Arcturian.
Okay, but are they humanoid? The ones you've seen?
The ones I've seen are humanoid, as in bipedal humanoid, yes. But Arcturians aren't exactly humanoid, because they stay up on, they prefer to stay in kind of the 5th density, but they can move up densities. And
okay, so you were exposed, I'm assuming, to these beings as well.
On various occasions, yes.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that I like always worked with them, but you would see them. Specifically at the base that I was at, they had their own section that was, you know, people talk about majestic clearance and cosmic clearance. Well, the ETs don't care about, or you show up and say, well, I've got majestic clearance. So, they were working on a whole different scope of things that I only got to see part of it on a few times, and a lot of it was working with the ocean and with doing genetic modifications of certain sea life.
Okay, but I guess I'm not clear on what you actually did.
Okay, yeah, I know, because we got kind of off track. Let me just put it this way. My team, when things went wrong, and it was on the level of cosmic or majestic clearance, on the cosmic clearance level, we're talking, you know, space fleet level, whether it was someone needed to be terminated, more of a diplomatic issue had come around, someone needed to be taken, or a wide range of things that really fall under the black ops scope, my team was called to do that.
Okay, but in the sea base you're talking about?
Yeah, in the sea base.
Okay, going on operations in this world?
Not just this world. All over. Again, you know, I know this sounds really weird and it's really hard to, it's really hard for me to still explain. I'm able to explain it better now than if I had during the first interview because of things I've been working on. But, okay, think of it like when Project Pegasus was, you know, first activated, and people were found and used strictly that had the makeup to be able to travel from here to Mars. Now, that was done for a lot of reasons, for colonizing, for gathering samples, for just experimentation.
Okay.
But projects like that were also used for more of gain, more of sometimes on certain colonies a situation would happen and it needed to be taken care of, and they needed the properly trained people to take care of that situation, to terminate that person. One memory I have, I don't know where it was at, but there was a group of 5 scientists. And these 5 scientists had decided to be non-compliant. And the order was to terminate them. And they are off-world. My team was sent to do so.
Okay, when you say off-world, where off-world?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I really don't. Listen, I get fragments of memories. Maybe in time things will come. This was another reason why I'm working closely with Axe on a lot of this, because Axe has memories of things that she was a part of that I wasn't necessarily part of, but we have right now compiled, which I have put away on a safe hard drive, probably about 1,000, at least 1,000 different correspondence, documents and other things, pictures, that at some point I would like to get together, which will paint a better picture of what Project SEAGATE and what we actually did is all about.
Were you leaving your body at all?
No. Okay, I should say this wasn't part of the Omega project that used soulless beings. I physically went.
Okay.
And this wasn't like, I believe Andrew Passaggio says in Project Pegasus that they actually couldn't wear metal. In this case, we could wear all of our gear. We would go in this type of submersion suit under the water so that when we came out of the next level, we could take off that submersion suit and be in our dry gear so that we could carry on with whatever task we had to do.
Okay, did you go to Inner Earth at all?
No, I don't ever recall going to Inner Earth. But I did do an operation in Panama where we were guarding an entrance. There actually is an entrance in Panama to Middle Earth. But that was a side operation because Project SEAGATE, Pro-C itself, was my base of operations for quite a long time. Even Axe, and at some point it'd be good for you to talk to Axe, because Axe has absolute memory of me being at this facility when I was a child. I don't remember that. She claims, and I believe her because I worked with Axe for many years.
Wasn't she like your runner? Didn't she? Was she like kind of like?
Yes, her call sign, which I do remember, was called. And I want people to get this mistaken up with movies. It was Sky Watcher. She was a remote viewer. She had the ability to go out of body. She didn't always travel with me. When I would do a jump, she would sit in what was called the chair, which I don't remember if I showed you a schematic of the chair, where you had a very powerful remote viewer who could do OBE, out of body experience. And she would basically, she was like my astral reconnaissance. She was my watchful eyes, so that things could be recorded, and they actually were recorded through very highly advanced alien technology, so they would have record of what transpired. Because I didn't always go with a team, sometimes I'd go on solo missions.
These memories that are coming back to you, did they come back to you and cause some kind of psychological breakdown at a certain point?
Oh, yeah.
At what year, do you know?
When the memories were really coming and they were so vivid that I actually felt like I was in, it was reoccurring. That really started probably about the early part of 2006, maybe February, March.
And at what point were you let go from the service? I mean, I know you're technically actually still on call, and
I'm technically still on call. It was December 22nd of 2005 when I found myself at the Portland, Oregon airport, not remembering even my own name. It even took me months to relearn how to write. I couldn't do basic math. They had done a complete... Here is the problem. That's something that Duncan, Elaney, Axe, and others are trying to work out. I'll try to be quick. Normally, there's a shelf life with this reprogramming they do, and usually in the 50s or 60s is when it comes back. The thing that nobody can figure out is how so quickly this breakdown of the mental block has happened with me. No one, we've been trying to figure it out. The only suspicion is there's an outside benevolent reason that has caused this for certain reasons that I've not yet.
Okay, and you're how old?
31.
Okay, so you're still quite young.
I feel like I'm 100.
I know. So you had to have a trigger event that happened that made your life change such that you ended up not knowing your name at this airport, right? In Oregon.
Yeah. Yes.
So do you want to address that? How did that happen?
Well, I'll give an explanation, but I really, at this time, I don't want to get into too much detail. There's reasons, because I've been instructed, not by bad people, but I've been instructed. Okay. Axe and I, we were at the facility. This was around maybe June or July of 2005. Normally, when a jump occurs, and a jump is, you know, traveling through the portal at SEAGATE, it's actually a pretty big operation. You have an operating area, which is kind of like main control, where you have the people that are running, you know, all the electronics, everything. You have another, along the pool where the portal's at, there's 5 chairs on each side that have remote viewers. What exact role they play, Axe can better describe that. I'm really hoping she'll at least do some kind of anonymous transcript with you or something, because she'll add a lot to this. Then you have another person that sits at what's the coordination dome, the chair that's underneath, that is a very strong, usually a bilocation remote viewer, where this dome actually moves in a way to, it's almost like setting a compass to where an waypoint, a destination is calculated, that goes into the system somehow, and then you know, bam, where you're going to jump to. So it's a big process, a lot of people involved. I was given a message of huge importance. Now, I say given a message, you could say a message was really overpowered me to where I did something that my entire life I had never done. I went against direct orders. I completely disregarded all directives and disobeyed everything that I'd ever stood for. And I went into almost an autopilot. I had convinced a couple of the operators, a couple of the key players. We kind of activated the SEAGATE through a skeleton crew. How I convinced them, I don't know. Somehow I did. I know that I was in good standings there and I was pretty high up as far as who I was. Maybe that had something to do with it. The location that was designated was a place that was pretty much off the grid, had been already years before, came down from those who lived in that area as this is off limits. You guys want to do whatever else you can, do not come here. If you come here, we're going to shut things down. So, some beings that have definitely a huge influence on what goes on in this galaxy. I went there, something transpired. I was given something. This is the reason why, since 2006, up until just a month ago, I have around 103 separate instances of missing time. Some where I've come back with permanent marks, burn marks. Other ones where I've come back with other things that have occurred, where I've had some very reliable, absolute people confirm what took place. There's information that's in here, that was placed in here, that they're having difficulty getting out because they want it.
You mean the government?
Yeah. It's what's the reason why I've moved so much and I've had such a complicated life, because I can never know when I'm going to be going somewhere and I'm going to wake up on a park bench or somewhere where they just drop me off, because they don't just drop me off home, they'll just drop me off wherever. When I returned from this jump, the government, the high-ranking officials had already found out, obviously. You can't do a jump there without them finding out. So I obviously knew, I knew what was going on. Axe, they had grabbed Axe and they had brought her into the jump room. And that's when things got pretty messy, pretty ugly. I remember telling Axe to get the hell away from me. I didn't really understand what entirely had happened, but I remember that something bad was going down. What happened to Axe after that, I don't know, because I didn't reunite with her. It was just through a miraculous chain of events at the Awaken Aware conference, where it was the first time I had had contact with her since 2005. But I believe that everything happens for a reason. Anyways.
Well, did you both recognize each other at that time, or did just one of you?
No, we both did, right away. It was pretty emotional.
And Duncan also recognized you,
right
isn't
away.
That right? Yeah.
Yeah, and Dave.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
so let me just say this, so we can wrap this portion up, because there's a lot of details I'm purposely leaving out for reasons we explained off camera. There was a gap, obviously, between June and December. I have zero memory of. I don't know what transpired between June and December 2005. I don't know what happened. But my first memory of this kind of second life, because really I've only been having constant memories besides missing time since December 27, 2005. They did what's called a full memory suppression. And how they do this, they have through psychotropic drugs, electronic electroshock and some other methods, there are parts of your brain that are not designed to hold memory. What they do through this process is they shift, imagine they shift all your memory from one side of the brain into the other. And then they can either leave that blank or they can put in false implant memories. They decided to leave mine blank. They didn't want me to know anything, not even my own name. This process has a shelf life that is done on purpose. The shelf life usually between the ages of 50 and 60s, when these men and women, the shelf life in the wall starts breaking down and memories start coming over quickly. Now, everybody in the projects, in these kind of projects, have basically, you could say it's a self-termination program. Just last year, 3 people that were in the project that actually Duncan knew, and I knew one of them. They're no longer with us because they had that breakdown. They couldn't take it. They self-terminated. They killed themselves. I'm getting to a point here with this, so just bear with me because this is kind of a rough subject. This is one of the reasons why I worked so closely with my dad, because that shelf life was breaking down with him now. This is why I'm trying to continue staying in contact with him. In 2006, and I remember it was in July of 2006, the floodgates were starting to open. This is what's strange. This is why it's kind of an anomaly, the fact I'm so young and this broke down. I believe that's from outside influence that are trying to work with me in some way. I'd had enough. And my self-termination program did kick in. Where I was living at was a place where no one knows I was completely off the grid, and I went and I got a bottle of alcohol, and I had somehow gathered quite a collection of narcotics, heavy narcotics. I made my own cocktail and I ingested it. The next morning I wake up at this hospital with an IV in me, not remembering. And here's what the doctor told me. Now where I was living again, let me say this again real quick. I was at a house that was kind of like a flop house that was in this, it was a gated community, but it was like a flop house. It wasn't, I don't know how I got there. I just went there through a chain of events. The doctor and a couple of nurses told me that I was carried into the hospital by a tall man who then in turn had what little property, what little clothes I had in bags in his car. He dropped me off. He told the people exactly what drugs were in my system of this cocktail. Now, I didn't have pill bottles. I just gathered them from here and there. And then they grabbed me. They took my stuff. When they turned around, because obviously the nurse needed him to fill out some information, the guy was gone. He never gave his name, nothing. There's no way anybody could have known what I had in my system. The doctor told me I had enough narcotics in my system that I should have put an elephant down. And that was one of the many times I've had doctors say, I don't know how you're still alive. Some would say it's a guardian angel. Some could say maybe it was someone from the project who was watching over me out of concern. I have another theory that's a little more out of this world. But
now I'm getting the impression that you're talking about possibly the very tall beings, the Anunnaki.
I thought that first, but indeed that's not. Well, let's use Arcturian.
Okay.
I've only talked about this a couple times. I don't really talk about it because even I am by nature a soldier who needs tangible things. Even though I've seen a lot of out of this world and been off planet, seen some stuff, for this to happen to me now, after being tossed to the wayside, it's hard for me to sometimes even accept. But I get information that's kind of downloaded to me, and I've been getting a lot of recent answers since I've started this detox, and since I've been a lot of regaining. And a lot of information that's come to me has been revolved around the Arcturians.
Okay.
still something that I'm working on closely with certain people, but I wasn't even going to be talking about this right now because it's something that's difficult because it's okay. One of the, I know what it is. I'm in the why me phase right now.
I understand.
Why did this have to happen to me? You know, you put in a lifetime of work that you don't even choose. I didn't ask for any of this. This was chosen for me. And then this happens, and then that happens. Do I get aggravated? Yeah. Am I glad that my self-termination program was interfered with? Absolutely.
Well, actually, I have to say that you had to have chosen all of this as a soul before you came into this body.
I hear that so many times. I do hear that a lot.
Okay. But at any rate, at some level, you seem to be just beginning to take up your mission on the light side, as I would call it.
It's really just begun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think really the grassroots with it was first contacting you. And then getting a lot of support from Duncan, from Dave, from Jordan Maxwell, from Miriam Delicato, from Axe, and actually quite a few others. My network right now with whistleblowers is pretty big. I mean, Dr. Deagle, Jeff Harvey, Ral Val, who is another person that you should definitely get in contact with. You know who she is.
Okay.
But it really has just begun, and I've only yet to begin because there's so much more that I know that I'm here for into helping others.
Okay. What I want to do now is go back to the Ben Heather situation.
Oh, that was the other thing that we were going to talk about.
Yes. And then we're going to have to wrap this up.
We are, because we're already in tape 3.
Yeah.
I told you I had a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to explain anything about that first? Or you want me to just go right into it?
Okay. I did a radio show interview with Ben Murphy, who was part of the Heather material. He was the contactee who was in contact with Heather, who then basically disappeared, but she worked in a black project as a scientist and was part of basically Project Omega and some other projects. And then in the midst of the interview, something told me to ask Ben whether or not Heather had worked with dolphins. Something came to me, as it does sometimes when I'm doing interviews. I get downloads. And sure enough, that triggered a whole memory sequence for Ben and also for Aaron. And what happened was, after the show, Aaron contacted Ben Murphy, and I'll let Aaron tell the rest.
I listened to that interview in detail, and yes, it definitely, things triggered, and I recognize my triggers very well. I mean, when I listen to something, I don't sweat and I don't panic. So when I start shaking and I start getting cold sweats and I start getting violent flashbacks, gut feeling tells me there's something substantial to this. So I emailed Ben and I explained to him what it was, and then I gave him just a very brief history, background, not of growing up, because he was already aware of some of that, but of my involvement with Project SEAGATE. And the letter I got, which I think would be good, and I will make sure you get another copy of it.
Okay.
The letter he sent me was basically him dictating what Heather said. And the details of her involvement with working with dolphins on the Super Soldier program, which is under the Omega Project, were uncanny. In fact, there's no way what she details in that letter she couldn't have just made up without absolutely knowing something. We had a lot of white coats, scientists, also known as operators. We had a lot that would be contracted out. Again, Project SEAGATE had special contracts with facilities like AUTEC and San Diego and various places, all water-based facilities with dolphins. Heather, I believe, I will say I'm 99% sure, based on what she said and my instinct, that she was in some way a researcher, a scientist, a white coat for Project SEAGATE. I am going to, eventually when I get the website put up, that's one of the info, I'm going to have a whole section devoted to Project SEAGATE. But I will definitely get you a copy of the letter so you can post that, and then I will turn and post it on what I'm using now with my Facebook. I can't stand Facebook, but it's a means to an end, I guess. But
okay,
there is a possibility, because that is a close network, Project SEAGATE. Everyone pretty much knew everybody on some level, whether you recognized who they were or what they did. So there's now a good chance that her and I may have crossed paths at some time, at some point.
Okay, and are you, when you talked to Ben and he told you his memories and wrote to you about his memories of information that Heather had given him, because my understanding is that Heather and Ben are not in contact at this moment.
Right. I should say he dictated. It wasn't like she was staying over him saying it. He wrote down to the best of what she had described to him. As far as I know, they're not in contact, and I would, because of the sensitivity, I think that if they were in contact, Ben wouldn't say anything anyways, which is very smart, because the information that's been released, even the information she released, that letter she sent to me, which I haven't made public, there's some sensitive stuff in there.
Okay.
And once people see the greater picture, when I start releasing everything from Project SEAGATE, my documents, my transcripts, absolute proof, that's going to be one thing to add to it that's really going to be a huge door buster.
Okay. What about the idea, couple things. Do you have any memories of being in undersea bases and or just underground bases in Florida?
I was in Miami for a while. I've had two people that remained completely anonymous who reside in Florida who have made claims that I was at an undersea base in Florida. I have another guy that's absolutely reliable. I'm not going to say his name, but he was with the military for 20 years, and him and I have discussed things in depth, and he was at AUTEC for quite some time. He was at Dulce Mountain. And he has accounted things that him and I have talked about that would lead me that at some point I was at Bimini Island, which has an underground facility. But I do have clear memories, absolutely, being of underground facilities in Oregon, Northern California, San Francisco Bay, and out in Arizona.
Okay. And what about, do you know anything about Sarasota?
Sarasota, Florida. No, but I have a list that I have compiled. I'll have to dig it out and I can get to you, but it's basically a list of all the known, state by state, of all the known underground facilities. I don't know if Sarasota's on there, but it might be.
Okay. Well, I was given recent information of a Stargate there.
Was this without revealing names? Was this of a certain person that I tried to get in contact with?
No.
Okay, this is not that person.
Not to my knowledge.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, you know, there was an interesting magnetic anomaly that occurred off of the Dominican Republic about a month ago that didn't make it on mainstream news. That was a Stargate-like opening that happened, and then also, and people can look at this. It's on. There have been radar images of specifically Australia, Norway, Russia, and other places with this unusual circular vortex thing. Mm-hmm. There's one of the United States now. Now, like of the Australia, it's just one. The one Norway, it's one. There's one of the United States now that has as a real image that there's 6 of them. And 2 of them are over Florida. These anomalies are popping up
all over now. One of the key areas of the Heather research was her discussion about working to create beings that could go in and out of portals and not be destroyed in the process. And
that's because these omega beings, these Solus beings, are not the most stable of beings. That's why. You know, they had, you can think of it as like they had a kind of a shelf life. And this relates back to the Gulf of Aden. There's an
sea facility there where there was this private research company. It was in articles, I have articles about it, where that French doctor, they claimed that she tried to kill herself, and she said the world must need to know, where they were doing alien human genetic experimentation, which they said was related directly to the SEAGATE. So there are multiple areas where they're doing this. I'm sure Heather was probably very much aware of that. So yeah, that's fact.
Okay.
Those things are happening.
And do you know anything about, this is kind of off in left field, but do you know anything about pharmaceutical companies and their black ops programs?
The pharmaceutical companies have been very much involved in that. Not pharmaceutical companies can't necessarily get a hold of certain rare plants that create certain kinds of proper chemicals. So they'll send in a team to, either persuade or gather, even grabbing. Because black ops isn't just kidnapping people and killing. It's also gathering intel. It is falsifying intel. It's espionage of some means. It can even be, tampering with the government so the government falls. I mean, black ops have been doing that. That's how Saddam Hussein became. It's what just happened with the entire Polish government. If anyone thinks that that was an accident, I'm sorry. That was a false flag operation. They were executed for a multitude of reasons. We'd get into that another time. One of the things I've been researching.
Okay.
But let me just ask you this. What specifically are you referring to as far as pharmaceuticals? Because they are a corrupt, really military industrialized complex.
Well, part of the Heather material was that she was working in a black ops portion of one of the pharmaceutical companies underground in Florida.
When I first read the Heather document, it brought me back to something we were talking about on the way here of Project 13, which is the manipulation and enhancements and modifications of the 13th chromosome.
With autism.
Autism, Asperger's, multiple personality disorder, bipolar, ADD, ADHD, all these things derive from the 13th chromosome, which makes up of like 4.5, it's either 4.5 or 5.7, I have the numbers at home, of the entire DNA strand. It is the smallest, but in all reality, one of the most important.
Right, and you and I were talking about basically that a lot of autism is occurring right now around the globe, and that this is being manufactured by black ops programs.
The pharmaceutical companies have a huge hand in it.
And part of that is to create precogs, because autistic children have, not only are they extra, telepathic, but they are also able to have powers that have to do with seeing the future, and that was something, and that is an ongoing program, and the government is always using.
And like I said, some of them are actually not necessarily carry the soul of a human. A lot of these autistic kids and some Asperger's are being born, and it is actually the soul, the energy, the life force of an extraterrestrial being. A lot of them being Syrian, actually. This is why autistic children work so well with dolphins, because they are on the same communication level. They are totally in sync.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and there also seems to be a plot surrounding autism that you and I talked about that has to do with what appears to be, comparing notes here, the 13th chromosome taking humanity, and actually what happens is throwing into humanity, in the mix of humanity, these autistic children that will raise the vibration and change. They actually will jump humanity to another level. And this is the objective here. And they're being, in a sense, they're being used, sacrificed, whatever you want to call it, created in order to be triggers for this process.
And this is why, and just based on you telling me that, let's compare another note. The global elite, for a long time, the reason why they allow these slaughters to happen of dolphins and whales. Dolphins and whales both serve two separate but very significant purposes. One is, you could say, maintaining the frequency of the planet, and the other one holds an energy balance. It sounds similar, but they're a little bit different. Whales hold like a kind of a frequency. They maintain a frequency. Dolphins maintain the energy balance. They have been allowed to be killed for so long because if their numbers get too large, it will actually cause a frequency shift within humans. So they've suppressed at that level. So them in turn doing this with autistic children and Asperger's children is because it's on their terms, not the terms of the dolphins and the whales, which are sentient beings that really came here from another world. You know, their history is quite a lot more than what.
Isn't it possible,
says.
though, also that the sacrificed dolphin and whales, this is just, you know, and now we're going into the world of conjecture, okay?
Yes.
So I will say that outright. But the idea is that you have soulless beings. If you have a dolphin or a whale that dies, if you capture their essence or their soul, then you can put that into one of those beings and have an ongoing consciousness.
Yes, you could. You could. In fact, sometimes that actually occurs naturally, where and that's where you get these autistic children that actually, and I say Syrian, but I'm talking more of the soul of a dolphin, which is really the soul of a Syrian. This is something that, again, like you said, this could be a whole nother topic. This could be a whole nother interview. Me knowing the history of dolphins and why we worked with them at Pro-C, and I could do 2 hours on just that. But what I'm getting at is, it happens naturally. It is, and it's happening more and more and more. In fact, in Cirrus, in the origin of where dolphins come, there's been this wave of Cirrus, of souls from there that are on that energy level of dolphins have been coming here and embodying into humans. There's a little known species that are called the Nomos. I'm not sure if you're aware of them. You are. I should have figured.
No, I just think that I've heard of them.
The Nomos have had a big play. The Nomos prefer, they are kind of an energy type being that prefer taking the bodies of humans and dolphins that are from Sirius B.
Okay, and
the Dogon tribe of Western Sahara, they've known about this for thousands of years.
Okay. All right, so let's wrap this up,
okay.
Because it has been going on a while,
yeah.
Even though it's tantalizing to keep going for hours and hours. But so that we can basically tie this up in sort of a cohesive way, what is it that you want to say here? Because you're basically on a quest of some kind to discover who it is you are, and at the same time to reveal what the government, what the black projects have been doing, and what they're all about. Is there anything that you can say in terms of the future of the planet going forward to 2012 and beyond, that the purpose behind some of these programs might begin to reveal? And if it's still something that you're, investigating, then by all means say that. But
okay, it's a work in process. Unfortunately, I do consider myself, like others said, that I'm so young because that just means I have so much more ahead to look into. I'm still on this mission to reveal the totality of who I am and why I became this way, why I was chosen, and why the outside influences, malevolent and benevolent, are at this. I'm really, right now, I'm in this tug of war. I get pulled from side to side. A few whistleblowers have said it really well, and I say it too. In order for us to really get things more exposed, more people that were part of these projects need to come forward. Men and women. Yes, the danger's out there, but strength is truly in numbers. I want people also to understand that a lot of the information I share is, I guess, scary, a little out of this world, but it's not by any means to invoke fear. It's to educate, because education and knowledge is infectious, and it can be infectious in a good way. Once that knowledge expands out, you never know. This interview right now, it may not hit anybody, but if one person watches it and it causes one little trigger and they realize, oh my gosh, these visions I had are real, then I've in turn helped someone else, which in turn helps build the collective consciousness. So let me just say this real quick. And Alex Collier says this too, so I'm not the only one. To sit around in your chair and pray to God and say, God, please help civilization, we need help, that's not the way you do it. Until enough people on this planet show that they are wanting the truth exposed, that they're wanting enlightenment, that they're wanting to have this be the world that it was at one time, the collective consciousness needs to be built. Once that happens, yes, we have friends that are up in space that will come down and work with us. They're not going to help us. They're not going to come here and rescue us. It is up to us. So I will continue to research, I will continue to expose, I will continue to work on myself, which will in turn help expose more, and keep working with all the other whistleblowers that I'm connected with, and with Project Camelot, because that doesn't just benefit me, and it is healing. This is a healing process, but it also helps others, which is a healing process as well.
Okay, and one last question, which is, why do you think that they've left you alone at this point?
Well, they haven't completely left me alone, but it hasn't been as harsh as it was the past couple of years. I can only speculate that perhaps they have been told by an outside influence to leave me the hell alone. That's really the only thing that would make sense to me. That there is this race of beings that I mentioned earlier, or perhaps someone else that has said, if you mess with them, you're going to suffer some consequences. Because I have been very much put into a protective field now, recently.
Okay.
In fact, I didn't mention about those 2 times of missing time last week. I'm not saying that those were bad. That could have been something for a good reason. But I haven't woken up with any scars, marks, burns, chem marks, anything bad in over a month.
Okay.
So that's good.
Okay, Aaron McCOLLUM, thank you very much for coming forward,
Thanks,
for your
Gary.
courage. I really appreciate your service to humanity.
Well, and I appreciate yours and all the other people out there, and I appreciate when they listen to this. We just have to keep pressing on.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.